The morning sun broke across the Kansas prairie, painting the wheat fields in golden light. I had come back to the land my grandfather carved out of stubborn soil with his bare hands, land I inherited after his passing. To me, it wasn't just a farm, it was heritage. Every fence post had a story, every tractor wrote a memory of sweat and persistence. This was my retreat, the one place where I wasn't the Honorable Secretary of Transportation of the United States. Here, I was just David Mercer, grandson of a farmer, son of a truck driver, a man who liked to feel the dirt under his boots and watch hawks circle overhead. But peace never lasts long where HOAs crawl in. It started small, letters in the mailbox that didn't belong there. The Clearwater Meadows Homeowners Association claimed jurisdiction over the south side of my property. According to their map, my grandfather's barn sat inside their community development plan. I laughed it off at first. Nobody in their right mind would believe a Washington, D.C. bureaucrat cared about some HOA with delusions of grandeur. Then came the surveyors. One evening, I pulled into the drive and saw orange flags stabbing into the soil. A group of men in neon vests traced lines across the wheat, marking it like they owned it. I rolled down my window. "Can I help you, fellas?" I asked, voice low but edged. A younger man looked up, clipboard in hand. "We're with Clearwater Meadows HOA. Just finalizing the grading layout." "Grading layout for what?" "The community airstrip," he said casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Runway's going right through here. Big plans for this place." I blinked. For a moment, I thought he was joking. "A runway? Through my farm?" He shrugged. "According to the plat, this section falls under HOA authority. You can file a complaint with the board if you want." By the time I processed his words, another man was hammering a stake into the middle of my field. My grandfather's wheat bent beneath his boot. Something inside me snapped. "You pull those stakes out," I growled, stepping from the truck, "or I'll pull them out for you." The surveyor hesitated, but the older one sneered. "Sir, we've got the permits. You're outnumbered here." That night, I sat at the kitchen table of the farmhouse, staring at the papers they'd shoved in my hands, legalese dripping with arrogance, signatures from county clerks who clearly hadn't read a word. They thought I was just some backwoods farmer who wouldn't know how to fight back. They had no idea who I was. I folded the papers neatly, slid them into my briefcase, and whispered to the empty kitchen. "You built a runway on the wrong man's farm." 2 weeks later, the sound of heavy machinery shattered the prairie silence. From the porch, I watched bulldozers crawl across my wheat fields like yellow beetles, their blades slicing the earth. Concrete trucks lined the gravel road, their chutes spilling gray rivers into wooden frames. The HOA wasn't bluffing. They were really pouring the foundation of a runway on my land. I stormed down the drive and waved my arms. "Cut the engines." Now, the foreman, a barrel-chested man in a hard hat, leaned out of the cab. "Orders from Clearwater Meadows HOA, Mr. Mercer. We're on schedule. Runway'll be operational in 6 months. You're trespassing," I barked. "This is private property." He gave me a half-smirk, half-shrug. "Not according to the county plat. You can call the sheriff if you don't like it." So I did. But when Sheriff Collins pulled up, he scratched the back of his neck and muttered, "David, my hands are tied. Papers say this land falls under HOA zoning. It's messy, but they've got signatures." I felt a slow, hot rage climb into my chest. They thought they could bury me under paperwork and intimidation. They thought I was powerless. That night, I flew back to D.C. Inside the marble halls of the Department of Transportation, my staff found me at my desk long after midnight. Maps spread across the table, legal documents highlighted in neon ink, phone numbers scrawled on yellow pads. "Sir," my chief of staff, Angela, whispered, "What's going on? You look like you're preparing for war." I leaned back, eyes burning. "I am. These people are trying to build an airstrip through my grandfather's wheat. They think it's just farmland, but it's more than that. It's a federal matter now." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Federal?" I tapped the stack of documents. "Runways aren't backyard swimming pools. The FAA regulates every inch of them. You can't just pour concrete and call it a landing strip. You need permits, safety inspections, flight path analyses." A slow smile tugged at her lips. "And you, sir, happen to be the man who signs off on all that." "Exactly." Within days, I filed a formal review through the FAA, citing over 50 violations in the HOA's project. Safety hazards. air traffic conflicts, environmental concerns. I buried them in red tape so thick they'd choke on it. But Clearwater Meadows didn't back down. Instead, they doubled down. Flyers appeared around town promising Clearwater Community Airport, bringing prosperity and convenience to all. HOA leaders strutted through council meetings, boasting about economic growth. The local news ran puff pieces with smiling residents imagining weekend flights to Florida. And through it all, they painted me as the villain, the obstructionist farmer standing in the way of progress. One evening, I turned on the TV to see HOA President Karen Whitfield sitting in a studio, pearl necklace gleaming under the lights. "This man, David Mercer, claims he owns the land," she said sweetly. "But we all know he's just trying to use his government connections to bully hard-working families. We won't let one man's greed stop our community's future." I clicked the TV off, jaw tight. This wasn't just about my farm anymore. This was about power, arrogance, and entitlement, and they had just declared war on the wrong man. The night the floodlights came on, my land looked like a battlefield. Rows of halogen lamps blazed across the half-finished strip of concrete, throwing harsh shadows on the prairie grass. The HOA had brought in private security, men in reflective vests with radios clipped to their belts, pacing like soldiers guarding a fortress. Trucks rumbled in and out well past midnight. They weren't slowing down. If anything, they were accelerating. I stood at the edge of the field, fists buried in my jacket pockets, watching as a cement mixer groaned and poured its load onto ground that should have been filled with wheat. Every ounce of me wanted to march down there and drag them off my property, but that's exactly what they wanted, an outburst they could spin into violent farmer threatens community project. So instead, I went to court. The federal courthouse in Wichita smelled of old paper and cold air. Reporters lined the hallway, cameras flashing as I walked through. To them, I wasn't just a farmer. I was the U.S. Secretary of Transportation, filing suit against a homeowners association. It sounded absurd. It sounded petty. But to me, it was survival. Inside, the HOA's lawyers, slick suits and smug faces, argued that the plat maps gave them jurisdiction, that my land had been absorbed into their development decades earlier by clerical oversight. Their star witness, Karen Whitfield, took the stand in a crisp blue blazer, painting herself as a patriot fighting for progress. "All we want," she said, her voice dripping with sugar, "is to create opportunities for our community. Jobs, access, growth. Mr. Mercer is using his political power to strangle us. He's forgotten what it means to be a neighbor." I rose slowly when it was my turn. "Your Honor," I began, my voice echoing across the chamber. "This isn't about neighbors. It isn't about growth. This is about theft. My grandfather broke his back to carve this farm out of wild prairie. My father bled for it. And now, a group of bureaucrats with inflated egos think they can pave over it with concrete and lies." I held up a document. Runways are federal infrastructure. They require FAA clearance, environmental impact studies, noise abatement plans. This HOA has none of that. They didn't just trespass on my land. They broke federal law. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Reporters scribbled furiously. Karen's smile faltered. The judge leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Mr. Mercer, are you saying this project is illegal under federal aviation law?" I locked eyes with him. "Not just illegal, Your Honor, dangerous. A runway without oversight isn't progress. It's a disaster waiting to happen." The next day, the ruling came down. Effective immediately, all construction on the Clearwater Community Runway was to cease. Federal marshals were authorized to enforce the order. The HOA faced fines in the millions, with personal liability for board members who had approved the project. That evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, I stood at the edge of my field and watched marshals escort the security guards off my land. The bulldozers sat silent, their blades caked in dirt they'd never move again. And for the first time in weeks, the prairie was quiet. But this war wasn't over. Not yet. The HOA was humiliated, and desperate people rarely go down without a fight. The dust settled, but the fight left scars. For weeks, Clearwater Meadows HOA tried everything: appeals, smear campaigns, even protests outside the courthouse with signs that read, "Mercer hates progress," and "Let our community fly." Their outrage was loud, but their money was bleeding away in legal fees and fines. The airstrip project had collapsed under its own arrogance. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. Every time I drove past the half-poured concrete, it reminded me of how close they'd come to stealing my family's land. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head. The land doesn't belong to you, David. You belong to it. Protect it. One evening, as the last light sank across the prairie, a black SUV crunched up my gravel drive. Out stepped Karen Whitfield, pearls gone. Her expression hardened into something colder. You think you won, don't you? She hissed, marching toward me. You embarrassed us. You ruined us. But people don't forget. You'll regret crossing Clearwater Meadows. I didn't flinch. Karen, the only thing I regret is how far you dragged your neighbors into your madness. You wanted a legacy? Now you've got one, in court records and bankruptcy filings. Her jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought she might lunge at me. Instead, she spun on her heel, climbed back into the SUV, and vanished down the road. That was the last time I saw her. The months that followed were quieter. Federal marshals oversaw the dismantling of the half-built runway, the concrete jackhammered back into gravel. Slowly, I replanted the wheat. By spring, green shoots pushed through the scarred earth, stubborn and alive. But word of the battle spread far beyond Kansas. Newspapers dubbed it the Runway War. Late-night talk shows joked about the Secretary of Transportation who grounded his own HOA. And while the attention was overwhelming at times, there was one part of it I welcomed. Letters poured in. Farmers from Iowa, ranchers from Texas, families in small towns across the country. They all told me the same thing. They tried to take our land too. We fought back because of you. It wasn't just about my farm anymore. It had become a symbol, a reminder that no matter how powerful a group looks, arrogance has limits. One warm June morning, I walked the field alone, boots crunching in the dirt, and paused at the spot where the first surveyor had driven his stake into the soil. I bent down, brushed the dirt aside, and pressed a fresh wooden post into the earth, not a marker of theft, but of defiance. This land wasn't a runway. It wasn't a project. It was home. And as the hawks circled above, their wings catching the sunlight, I whispered into the wind, Grandpa, it's safe. They'll never take it from us. The prairie answered with silence. The good kind. The kind that belongs to open skies and honest work. The kind that reminds you some victories aren't about headlines or courts. They're about keeping the ground beneath your feet.